fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and Al Warren.
Heard on KCAA 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
We're talking with Eric Shapiro today. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
So, wow, you do have quite the history of books and everything. Let's just talk, because this is the first time you've been on this show, so maybe give the listeners a little briefing of who you are and what you do.
Oh, sure. It's, I'm getting better as time goes on at summarizing it, because it's been erratic over the years. Like, as you said, I've made films. I've made a couple feature films. They're called Living Things and Rule of Three. I was in L.A. for a stretch, and I was more in the movie business. Still do projects from time to time and get hired to do, like, trailers and stuff like that. But what I'm doing for the most part day to day is my wife and I own a newspaper in Silicon Valley called the Milpitas Beat. And we've been doing that for the past 3 years. And in the midst of doing that sort of work, I just wrote a novel that came out earlier this year called Red Dennis, a thriller. And I also had a nonfiction book released this year, which is called Ask Plus C, which is all tips to help writers become inspired and stop procrastinating. So, so it's a mishmash of journalism, books, screenplays, filmmaking, all that kind of stuff.
That's interesting. What makes you do that? Like, and I mean this in the sense of, so, okay, here you are in L.A., and
Sure.
You're doing a little bit of filming, and then you end up moving, and then get into doing a paper and writing a book. Like, what kind of was the change?
Yeah, that's a really good question. When we moved up north, it was kind of unexpected. My wife's father was passing away, so this was like 2015. So we were adjusting. We also, we were having children, so we wanted to sort of go to the suburbs with our kids, and we went to a city, right, that's snug up against San Jose called Milpitas, which we quickly learned that the local newspaper had been bought out by a corporation. They were no longer publishing local news, so like City Hall, City Council, School Board, there was like no coverage. It was all regional coverage that the paper was now doing. So it was still called the Milpitas Post. It's still around, but the local coverage has dropped off. So my wife, being a marketing person, saw the gap, and I had an extensive writing background. I've made my living as a ghostwriter. That's another piece I could add to the puzzle. I had made my living as a ghostwriter for like 17 years, and I was doing speeches and memoirs and business plans, screenplays, script doctoring. It was a real busy company, but I was trying to get out of it because I was burned out, too many deadlines. And she was like, why don't we just start giving them local news, and we'll start an online newspaper. I think it'll work because it'll fill the gap. So it was her marketing genius that saw the gap and knew just how to fill it. So we started doing that, and we pretty quickly in the first 4 months or so got a pretty robust audience. Like, our paper is generally read by like 30 to 40,000 people a month in the city. So we were just always covering the news, giving op-eds and so forth. And in the course of becoming known locally for my op-ed writing, which is political, sometimes, provocative in the sense that it stimulates discussion, I often write things that, even though I identify as liberal and I vote Democrat, I often write things that are sort of quote-unquote outside the progressive bubble. And it's been an interesting experience seeing how the public takes that, whether they accept it or dismiss it or they get angry about it. And I've sort of cultivated a new identity as a writer around the op-eds. And I'd always done books, I'd written horror, like I'd always kept busy. And Red Dennis was sort of the combination of the political side of me and the sort of dark fiction side of me. And it kind of dovetails with me being identified here in my region as an op-ed person, because it's political content and it's challenging. Even though it's fiction, it kind of fits with how the opinion editorials are.
So now, there's a couple things. First of all, being a ghostwriter for 17 years, you only look 17, so I don't know how that happened.
Right. I think you were saying that. I don't feel it. I actually feel like, when MLK died, how old was Martin Luther King? He was like 36 when he died.
Yeah.
I always think about that story, how the person that did the autopsy, the forensic person, opened up his body, to examine him, and said on the inside he looked like he was like 65 because there was so much stress and inflammation because of who he was and how he lived his life. Yeah. And thank you for saying that, because I got to tell you, from all that ghostwriting, I really feel like I'm ready to retire. Like, it was ridiculous. I was writing 2,500 pages a year. Like, and it was hard to say no to the work because it was always busy. It was lucrative work. But at a certain point, I was like, this is killing me. I gained weight, which I've now lost a lot of weight. But I needed a turnaround. So the newspaper has kind of been my savior. It's been a fun thing to work on with my wife, and it's still growing. It's in its third year, but yeah. So hopefully next time you'll tell me I look like I'm 15.
Well, don't hold your breath.
And you get to put your name on it when you're not a ghostwriter anymore. You get to put your name on it. So that must be.
You got it. Yeah, you said it, and that was always an issue too. It's what it was, what my life was I was always ghostwriting, speechwriting, etc. And then I would always steal time to do personal projects. So maybe once a year I'd write a novella, which you can draft in like 2 weeks. It's like 25,000 words. So I was getting recognition for my fiction, but it was never particularly commercial, so it was always frustrating because my income was always coming from the ghostwriting, which was uncredited. Oftentimes, I would say more often than not, I didn't want credit for the ghostwriting, just because the projects weren't, whether I thought it was good or not, I always tried to make them good. Like, usually I just wasn't aligned to them. It wasn't material I was personally into. So there was that factor. But I was trying to build like a career as a fiction writer, which I'm passionate about, or at least, around, if I was writing nonfiction, just areas I'm interested in. And it was always, a slow process because I was snowed in with all these ghostwriting obligations. So really I got liberated finally a couple years ago when the paper started. We had a new source of income. And then, like you said, name recognition. Then finally it started moving. But it was a long slog through all those years of ghostwriting. I was constantly complaining, constantly angry. So, yeah, it was a big shift.
So you're not Milli Vanilli anymore.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's in a nutshell, yeah. Yeah.
Date yourself there, Al.
I know. I was going to say, is that? It's going to be too old. I was going to pick up.
No, that's a good one. I think you got me. I was like in 6th grade, but
sixth grade.
It's funny you say Milli Vanilli because that's how I used to think of it as tracing paper. So Milli Vanilli was lip syncing. I'm like, as it goes through, I'm just tracing paper. It's just like they have their ideas, and I put them in some sort of structure, and then they come in with their edits, and it's not. It was, it's good work. Like I never had a ethical problem with the whole idea of credit or not taking credit. That was never an issue for me. But it's just one of those things. You're at the client's approval, and just always dealing with the questions, and it was a lot to deal with.
Yeah, too much like work.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Well, and so when you're doing this newspaper, I was going to say, so you're part of the fake news.
That's it. We're the same. Yeah. It's so funny because the Republicans locally have cozied up to me so much because I throw them a little love from time to time. It's not even like outright love, but because I'm willing to take exception to some progressive behavior or ideology, they trust me, which is interesting. So we've actually gotten recognition as a result of that for being moderate. So as opposed to most newspapers, especially in this area, which are like, it's just a very hard left-wing ideology. And if you know how to parse the difference between left and right, you can see it with every story. But we try and cover the spectrum. Yeah. So it's only like 25% of our local population here is Republican, but we try and represent them. I mean, they're basically closeted, which is fascinating.
Oh, geez, come out of that closet.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, you got it. There's left ideas and right ideas that are both extreme and both kind of silly. And
you got it.
And to try and put that on anybody else is ridiculous. It's just either something that's sensible or it's not, and fair and not. None of this other weird stuff. And
you got it.
People just got to need to relax. The idea is that you're in a free country where you can be who you are, and that's supposed to be the idea of it, right? So
yeah, that's supposed to be the idea. Yeah.
You said it. I mean, we're in this really strange toxic phase with all that. Like, as a speechwriter in particular, I'm really into the art of persuasion, and I also got really into that, like, when I was selling my clients. Like, it's just like there's a fine art to negotiation. Like, if you're negotiating over 5 points and you're an experienced negotiator, you know that you should protect the point that matters most to you. You should be willing to give up 4 of them. You should be as generous as possible. You should make it clear which point is the one you really care about. There's a whole psychology to it that is at a remove from being on Twitter, just like lambasting people that don't agree with you and destroying them and canceling them. It's just like, you're not like, not only do you not persuade the person, but you run the risk of radicalizing them. Like, if you're coming from one ideology and you're like making somebody feel ashamed or tormented because they don't agree with you, they're probably going to hate you and everybody like you after you put them through that. So it's just a really disturbing thing, and how common it is pretty disturbing too.
Well, I think from my looking outside in right now, as I haven't been down since at least March, but my thought is that most of the American national news and news companies have ruined themselves. I think, and I mean this in a sense because the 24-hour news places, CNN, Fox, NBC, and all that.
MSNBC, yeah.
They're just extreme, and it's 24/7 Trump, love or hate, and that's it. And it's been going on for so long that the people are not getting any news. You know what I mean?
You said it. I mean, yeah, you're 100% right. And it's amazing how he's like the greatest troll in human history. Like, he understands marketing so well. Like, he makes it so we're always talking about him. And I've suffered in the past from OCD. So I like, it's amazing. It's like we have like countrywide or almost global, you could argue, OCD, where everybody's thinking and talking about Trump. Like, it's a mandatory thing. If you're going to talk politics, the conversation has to be hinged on him. And it's also frustrating for people that haven't really, had a life of quote-unquote studying politics or read books about it. They don't understand the finer aspects of it, that, you end up talking about his character and the more cartoonish dimensions of it. And it's just really exhausting. Like, I think a lot of people that hope he loses are coming from the standpoint of just like being tired of talking about him. And like, if he could just not be central to the narrative, it would help.
Oh, yeah. Well, you got to think about it, too, that if aliens landed on our planet today, it would be like the 3rd or 4th story in the news.
Yeah.
After the crazy thing Trump just
did. Yeah.
Well, and that's kind of the ridiculous thing. I don't quite understand that. And I think that contributes to people thinking, it's fake news, or it's bought and paid for, or it's just, it's left, or it's right. There is no, because they're not giving you anything basic. They're not telling you about little news stories that are going on. It's just, it's just Trump, and it's something around Trump, and I'm exhausted for next week. I
know.
I was invited to a party on Wednesday. Just a personal family thing. I was like, wait, I'm already preemptively, like, I'm going to be unconscious on Wednesday. Like, no matter what the outcome is, I can't. There's no Wednesday in my life. So.
Yeah.
It's really kind of a weird thing. But, so that's okay for you doing the paper and your op-eds. I get that. But now, when you go to write a project like you did with Red Dennis, how do you get away with doing that? Personally, because I know when I write things, what goes on in the world or what goes on around me will affect my mood and my behavior, and therefore my writing.
Sure.
So does it kind of put a damper in things? Does it make it better, worse, or what?
It really did. That's such a good question. I mean, I'm glad let me put it this way. I'm glad I'm not writing it, number one, but I'm not still writing it. Number two, I don't know if I've gotten away with it. Like, sometimes there's still a shadow over me at times. Like, I don't know if I'm out of it yet. It was strange because it came from a place of frustration around the culture wars, like everything I was just saying. In the character of Dennis, he ends up in sort of a small town quasi-Me Too scenario where you could take it either way. Like, he speaks inappropriately. It's nothing terribly egregious, but he gets accused of way worse than what he did. But still, he was being a creep. So you could love him or not love him. It's ambiguous. Like, I'm not trying to tip the reader's perception either one way or the other. But the real impetus behind the character was he goes into a rage. And it was interesting writing rage because it's not like, when I was writing it, it's not like I had the volume down up to 11 and the whole book is like him screaming. It was like the opposite. It's like just eating him from the inside. He feels very hollow. He feels like he's gone into shutdown mode, and he's sort of like, he's having a psychotic kind of snap. And it's just that it's all the journey of how he reacts, and he turns to violence, and he becomes, in a lot of ways, I think, people on the left will really enjoy it. in the sense that he like sort of fulfills all the worst stereotypes of the straight white male in terms of privilege, entitlement, lashing out, like how dare they do this to me. But on the other hand, it I think also paints on the flip side the danger of just willy-nilly sort of lazily lashing out and painting somebody as a misfit or a pariah or worse, because you, like I said, end up radicalizing that person. So I was really interested in radicalization, and I also felt it I felt it a little bit around the edges within myself. And I'm going to speak very carefully. It's not like I was snapping, but I felt it like I was like, I'm a Jewish guy, so I could easily just play the Jewish card in the culture war conversation and leave it at that. I'm a minority, but I'm also a white guy, and I've always identified as a white guy. And I was like, this drumbeat from the far left, like on Twitter, about whiteness that has gone on for like 5-6 years now is so disturbing to me. And I'm like, if it bothers me, imagine how a guy in Kansas with a gun on his hip must feel. And that's kind of where Dennis came from. It's like he's not from Kansas, but it's like, if it bothers me and I'm so far to the left and I understand a lot of the sentiment and the systemic racism, et cetera, imagine how it feels to somebody that is just not ready to hear himself spoken of this way. So, and there you have it.
Wow. But okay, so now your character, your Dennis, your Fordham, right? That's your character.
You got it.
How do you develop a character like that? Like, how did you create that person? Was it someone you knew? Was it from you yourself? Was it like someone, like a combination of people, or what? Where does that come from?
Really good question. It starts with I always start when I'm doing a protagonist in the first person. I always start writing as though it's me. And it's like me, it's kind of like the Hunter S. Thompson approach. It's like me under other circumstances. And in general, there's like enough of a shift. There's enough of adjustment in the points of emphasis and the circumstances the character's going through that it starts populating as a whole different person. So like, whereas when I start drafting, it might sound like me just writing an email, or of course it's more literary than that, but it's more, it's just Eric. But then I'm populating him with these specifics in terms of what he's going through, what he's reacting to. And then it branches off and becomes his own thing. And I've done this like probably half a dozen times with protagonists. So it's almost like they're all like cousins. It's almost like when an actor takes on a role, as opposed to like putting on a fake mustache or like a rubber nose or whatnot and like changing everything up the way they sound and an accent. It's like the more basic, like, all right, here's John Travolta or Tom Cruise or George Clooney, whoever. He's not acting different from his nature. It's Clooney, but but it's off, and here are the circumstances. It's kind of like that. So with all my novellas previous to this one, it was the same starting point, and it definitely is a way of drawing from my own emotional materials, which in this case was twisted because, like I said, he's like gone into shutdown. He's had so much rage that he's sort of blacked out on the inside. Like he's kind of like the electricity grid of his being is sort of shorted. So it was interesting, like how hollow he was, and there wasn't like sweet, tangible emotions. There was nothing sentimental or moving because he's not well. He's not in a warm or pro-social, pro-human place. So it was definitely a very unnerving side of myself, and it was also my first full-length novel. Whereas novellas are like 25,000 words. This is more like 70,000 words. So this is like 3 novellas in one. So I was spending a lot of time with him, and I was like making jokes on social media, like just my friends know that I'm working on this. I put a picture of me walking and be like, all right, I'm taking Red Dennis for his walk. It's like because he's always there with me in my head. So it was unnerving, but it was great to have the freedom to work on it after all those years of ghostwriting. It was like I'm going to go whole hog and just like go into this consensual hallucination where I'm like I half think I am this crazy guy, and it was a lot of fun.
But when you do that, does that make you more aware of some of the things you say and do in real life? Does that make you look at yourself and kind of go, "Ooh, I kind of"?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. As a matter of fact, a minute ago when you said, how did you get away with it in terms of, like, and you were going toward the character, I thought you were going to talk about socially, like, and then that was when I thought to say, I really, socially, I don't think I've gotten away with this book. Like, I had to go to Italy to get a publisher. I went to, I don't know if you guys know who Jack Ketchum is. He was like a really extreme horror author. Yeah, so I knew Ketchum. I adapted one of his short stories into a short film called Mail Order. And I worked with him. He was very supportive of my writing. He knew my novellas. And he passed away, unfortunately. His real name was Dallas Marr. And because I had worked with him, I had optioned one of his stories to do a script. I did another short film. So we had a relationship. So I knew his agent, Alice. And I figured this is perfect for her because Red Dennis is, I don't even want to use the word extreme about it. Like, it's not graphic or nasty, but it is emotionally dark. So I was like, well, this is pretty heavy material. So I'm going to go to Alice, Dallas/Jack Ketchum's agent when this book is done. And, and we're dealing with, I'm coming to her with a buffet of toxic, heavy-duty topics, like the Me Too movement, gun violence, straight white male. It's like all buttons, right? And she instantly rejected it. She looked at it for like an hour. She was like, for a variety of reasons, I can't do anything. I'm like, you were Jack Ketchum's agent. Like, did you read those books? Like, these books are so insane. I was like, but this is too much for you. So I ended up going to a publisher called Independent Legions in Italy, and they go pretty extreme. Like, they do reissues of Marquis de Sade books. I'm like, all right, they probably will be able to handle it. They really liked it. So thank God. So I got it placed well, but I still feel like the social dimension of it is unresolved as of now because I'm naive in the sense that I forget that people in my circle or in my community that are on the left or they're far left or they're quote-unquote woke, I forget that they really believe their ideology and they're really invested in it. And it's not like I'm not ideologically invested in my own political positions, but I forget that there are actually people that are sort of reading the handbook and sort of taking it as the whole of reality. And to them, I look like a total alt-right outlier. So it's like, just to even talk about these subjects just puts me outside the bubble. So, I'm still processing. But the good news is most people that encounter it, wherever they are politically, and a lot of women in particular, are really enjoying it. So that's positive.
Well, I think it's interesting that you brought Ketchum up because, he is kind of known for his extreme violence and things in his stories, which are great stories, by the way. But I've noticed here on Amazon that you've been compared to Philip K. Dick, which is a very good comparison. And then I just have to mention this one because I love this. The title of one of the reviews of your book is, if Stephen King and Quentin Tarantino had a baby, his name would be Eric Shapiro.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you feel about that?
Oh, my God, I feel wonderful. And a couple of the Red Dennis reviewers also cited Richard Bachman, which, Stephen King's alter ego. Yeah, and to me, I was a huge King fan. Growing up, I devoured King. But to me, Bachman was King at his best. I guess because of the lack of sentimentality. And it's like, I do like sentimental writing. Like, I have a side to me that's like, it's all the things I'm not talking about right now. Like, I do have a mushy side. Like, I'm a dad. I have 2 little kids. They bring tears to my eyes. Like, but in terms of writing a piece like this, like, Bachman to me is the height of like unsentimental, hard, disturbing. And with the Philip K. Dick thing, that got bandied about because my novellas were more like apocalyptic sci-fi, dystopian. So that was the place I was in for a while. And I talked with Alessandro, the guy in Italy who did Red Dennis, because he wanted to put the Philip K. Dick quote on the cover. There was some conversation because I was like, well, this is not, Red Dennis is not like sci-fi. It's not dystopian. It's not speculative fiction. So it could be a little confusing, but he still wanted to do it for the social dimensions and the psychology. So I was like, all right, rock on. We'll go for it. And he made it clear it's a dark thriller. So yeah, it's great to hear things like that. I mean, and also, like I said before, it's really been the past couple years where I feel like it's really started to click career-wise with the fiction because I was just stealing time for all those ghostwriting years.
Jeez, I've been called a dick a few times myself. Yeah. Now,
about your writing, Al?
About just me. They don't even wait. They don't even look at what I write. It's to say dick.
Right.
But they say it in a harsher way. But
Right.
So when you do you feel like you're kind of accomplishing something and all that stuff, but. Sure. Honestly, when you sit down and you look at it, do you feel like you've made it, so to speak, in the sense of as a writer?
Wow.
Are you comfortable enough to say? Do you have confidence to so you put out Red Dennis. Are you sitting comfortably going, this is a great book. I did a great job. I am a good writer. That's a hard question because I always feel insecure.
Yeah, it's tied up in like what I had for breakfast that morning. Like if there was enough sugar in the cereal, I think I'm the greatest writer that ever lived. But then like at 4 p.m., I can't even look at it. I would like want to throw it in the fire. So like it's a really hard question. Like in general, I have a baseline of confidence. Like I feel like I'm a pro. I've been hired a bunch of times. I've made my living doing it. Like the feedback is good. So I'd be I'd be lying if I said that there wasn't a baseline of like confidence. But in terms of like if it goes to a loftier consideration like greatness, I really like never have any idea. Like I might be able to say on a good day, if I had the sugar cereal, I might be able to say like by contemporary standards, I think it's maybe a stimulating book or an exciting book or a tense book. I think I would take it that far. But in terms of like, something that would last or sustain, like even if somebody tells me, I have the insecurity in the sense like, if somebody comes to me and says, oh my God, this is amazing, I love it, there is a part of me that's neurotic enough to be like, yeah, but I don't know if that means you're going to be thinking about it for the rest of your life. Like, I don't know if that means it's going to haunt your dream life. Like, is it really that great? Like, one of the books I read during lockdown was incidentally a Stephen King recommendation from years ago called, have you guys heard of The Ideal Genuine Man?
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. So that's a book about a guy that comes undone. And I just thought it was extraordinary. Like, I was gobsmacked. I thought it was just like a masterpiece, just dripping with poetry and insight and just aching over how good it was. And I was like, well, that is just a high-flying masterpiece. And, like, I would never deem something I've written on that level. Like, at a certain point, you just don't know. You can't quantify it. So it's just like I can do the best I can. I can get meticulous about each sentence, but at a certain point, I don't know. Even if somebody thinks it rises very high, maybe that means it rises very high for them as junk food. Like, you never have any real idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's two different angles, right? There's the technical, the person that has the right grammar, the words, they have the phrasing. Right. There's the technique, all of that. But there's also the story or the feeling behind the book or what it creates. So when you write, so like for instance, okay, let's take the Red Dentist book. When you've done this book and you put it out, someone picks it up and buys it. What do you want them to take home? Like, what is it you want them to think afterwards?
Yeah, it's always about the emotion. It's always the emotion for me, and that's something my wife attuned me to because we've been together for 23 years. We started dating in college, and she really was somebody early on in my writing that encouraged me to tap the emotion. And I think it's if there's of emotional insight, I think that's the key. And it's interesting because my other book, Ask Plus Seat, the nonfiction book, so I'm giving tips for writers, and one of the chapters is tips to value insight more than your voice. Because I think among writers and in writing workshops and like in sort of when people talk shop as writers, there's a big emphasis on finding your voice. And I understand what all that means. Like I just said a moment ago, like you asked me about where the character comes from, I said I write it in my own voice. So it's not like I dismiss or don't agree with the concept, but I really think the kernel you're looking for when people try to talk about voice is your insight, because your human insight is really what makes you you. So the ideal when somebody reads Red Dentist is just like I would want them to feel that it's just any sort of writing or filmmaking when you're sharing something. I think the cultural eternal custom is to hand it to them and be like, look and see, like take a look, just look and see through my eyes, and this is what I see, and do you see it too? And if they feel they see it too, then that's some sort of acknowledgement that okay, there was insight there. There was eyes worth looking through. So something along those lines.
Yeah, but how do you see that brings up the next question of when do you have the confidence? So if I'm writing through my eyes, I'm giving you it how I see it, and I write it and I compare it to something that's happened in my life, which writers do. So I'm talking about an event or something, and it relates to me in a certain way. But how do I not feel foolish about sharing something with myself or vulnerable? Like, where is it to the point where you can go, this is how I feel. I mean, because you're exposing something to everybody about yourself, and where is that okay? And how do you, where do you get that confidence, or how do you know you have it?
Wow, I think it's unresolvable. It's unresolvable on that level, like that vulnerability, like that's never a valve that closes. Like being exposed like that. I think I always feel, even if the character himself is not icky, I always feel a little icky and weird about it. But one thing I revert to in answer to the question is, you guys probably know the 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene, that book. One of the laws, I'm paraphrasing it, but one of the laws is that, something along the lines that boldness is more trustworthy than timidity. So in other words, if you're like at a dinner table and you're like the loud bellowing guy who's kind of obnoxious, maybe you're a little obnoxious. I'm not saying people should be obnoxious, like quite the contrary, but if you're the guy that's just sitting there watching, you're probably creating more of a sense of threat and uncertainty and instability than the guy that's out in the open. So, like, I do have, like, an exhibitionist thing where it's like, there is an excitement in being that vulnerable, just like going into the inner material to meet the rawness and sharing it. And it does look ugly. Like you said, when you look at it, like, do you think it's good? I can't even look at it. Like, I can't even, when I open the book and look at it, any of my books, everything seems wrong. It seems like alphabet. It seems like the sentences aren't crisp enough, like the words are bending on the page. It's not resolved. I could have gone in harder, deeper. That could have been tighter. So I abandoned it at a certain point. So I think the real answer is you can't resolve it. There isn't true confidence, I would say, like in the career sense, and maybe it's the filmmaking side of me, because when you're a filmmaker, you got to go out and get money. You got to go pitch to investors and streamers and networks and all that stuff. So you need to, like, even though you want to be modest and grounded, you also have to convince them that you're worth trusting. Yeah. So, and then also you're hearing the guy that has sold himself to clients too. So I think there's confidence on a fundamental, like, track record level. It's like, okay, in general, I don't know what my Rotten Tomatoes score would be, but in general, like, across all my works, even though plenty of people have hated them, there have been plenty of valid negative opinions that have stuck with me. I'm like, oh God, like, it's just, I definitely have plenty of days and moments where I think I suck, and it's common. But I think in general, like, enough people react emotionally and feel stimulated enough of the time that I feel like over time I've started feeling like a pro.
But when you get a review that picks out something in one of your stories about something that is actually part of you and not something you made up, does that hurt? Because I find that to be the most painful myself.
Oh, it's horrible. It's like, the comedian, when you look at the audience, the comedians talk about it, they look at the audience, everybody could be dying and howling, and if there's one person in the front row that's frowning, that's the person you remember forever. That's how that show went. So it's terrible. It's brutal. Like, I did a movie called Living Things that is very divisive. Like, it's a very 50-50 type of thing. It's about a vegan and a meat eater arguing over dinner. And it got, so you can imagine, like, it's designed to make people crazy. So, but still, even though I was, like, being, kind of a trickster and a smartass, like, designing it to, like, all right, this movie's going to get under your skin. There have been times where I'll look at Amazon, it's like, okay, another day, another 1-star review, and another 1-star. Oh, this person thought it was amateurs. Oh, this person wants the 2 hours of their life back. It's horrible. It's like, like, I wasted all the investors' money. I wasted all my time. I'm no good. I have no talent. I don't know what I'm doing. It's the worst. And I think, but I guess maybe if there's any, like, saving grace to all that inner monologue, it's just like, all right, there's a lot of pain that I can put back into something else.
As you're driving through the city, right? And,
right. Right, yeah.
So now your ass plus seat. I guess the title's caused you a little bit of trouble, hasn't it?
It has. Yeah. On Amazon, because I just started doing Amazon marketing, or Amazon advertising rather, the digital advertising, and they flagged it. It was interesting because they didn't catch it. Because they don't allow profanity. You can't even do $, nothing like that. You can't even apply it, right? So we got like 2 weeks at the beginning where nobody flagged it, and the book was performing like crazy. I'm like, whoa, we got a hit on it. That was actually selling better than anything I've ever written. It was like a good teachable moment. I'm like, okay, this is nonfiction. It scratches an itch. It fills a need. It's kind of a more direct sale. And something like with fiction, it's more like, you're sort of like gaining a trust with the readers, the different relationships. So that was great. And then naturally, like 2 weeks in, they're like, your ads have been flagged. And I was like, no. And then I almost called it butt plus C, but I just can't bear to do it. It's just not the essence of the book.
That doesn't make a lot of sense when you stop to think about the fact that right now there's a huge trend in publishing of inserting profanity into book titles.
You got it. Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, for the small indie, like Red Dennis wasn't self-published, but I self-published Ass plus C. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, but mid-pandemic, I'm like, I'm just going to publish this on my own. So I use the same company we use for the newspaper. And, like, one of my tools is the advertising. But I guess for bigger players, you can play fast and loose and put a curse there. Like, what is was his name Mark Manson?
Yeah, the subtle art of not giving an F.
Yeah,
and
you got
everything's
it.
F'd up.
Right, huge hits. So, but it's just on their advertising platform. Same with Facebook won't allow it either, and it's just crazy because that word is that's got to be the mildest quote unquote curse around. I mean, you
can say it on TV.
It's a donkey.
Well, yeah, I don't quite get that, but I know Amazon also doesn't allow like in one of my books, there's a blood splatter, and I know they don't allow that on theirs as well. Yeah. There's, which is kind of weird.
Was it real blood, Al? Was it?
Yeah.
Maybe that's why.
Right. You come to think of it. Yeah.
But how do they know that? Come on.
Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense, though, because the whole idea of having profanity in a book title is considered something that's marketable. So, we're going to sell more copies.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, because I was going to say that once I started sharing on social media the issue I was having with them flagging the word, then suddenly we had a little spike in sales. I was like, all right, you know what? It's just like, let me just just allow the controversy or the tempest in a teapot to give it a little more value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and people might search for ask more.
It's so funny. It's funny because I was so close to changing it to Bud, but I was like, I have a feeling. It's just an intuitive thing. Like, first of all, I like the word ask better, but I just have a feeling that something about that word might be helping at the point of sale. Because there's just something down to earth, crude, like unpretentious about it. So it's just like, and the word Bud like hits all the wrong buttons for me. It's just like, to me, it seems bland and overly safe and childlike. I'm just like, I'm staying away from that. But just something about ads. It's just it hits a different register. So
well, that goes back to your boldness is better than timidity thing, right?
Oh, you said it. Yeah, well said. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I love a good ass.
Yeah. You took again. You took the words out of my mouth. I didn't want to start going there, but it's like for somebody that like wants the pungency of an ass, it's like don't mess around with that. Yeah. Don't start giving them Bud. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand. Are you worried about that sort of thing? This sort of a little bit of a culture and even a way of censoring people. Like there's such a fine line of these public groups. You see, because I get it. If I'm, I do a show here for KCAA, and if there's something they don't want, okay, fair enough. I understand. And if I get really crass on air, they could say, "Oh, you're done," and because there's a point, but there's also a point of freedom. So when you're doing a book, like, that's kind of art as well.
Yeah.
So that's sort of where. Does that worry you at all? Like,
it does a lot. I think it's put a chill into a lot of artists in recent times, especially because a lot of the quote-unquote censorship is coming from the left, whereas when I was growing, I hate to sound like an old man, but when I was growing up in the 90s, it was coming from the right. Like, the whole board has changed. So now it's like the people that run the culture, the left, the people that are running Hollywood and most of media are the ones that have these attitudes. And I try and be compassionate about and sympathetic toward the motives. And every case is different. Like, I forgot the guy's name. There was a guy that was going to be on SNL, and he said these awful slurs about Asian people. And when I heard what he said, like, I got to tell you, so many times I'll go on the side against censorship. Like, that's kind of a dogma for me. That's where my bias is. It's like, all right, there can be no censorship. But his remarks, whatever they were so ugly, and they were witless. They were not insightful. There was no, like, lift or artistry or whatever. He just seemed like a scumbag. So I was like, you know what? I don't know if necessarily the solution is to take his job. Like, I do think, we've sort of passed the point where an apology is good enough, which is also scary. But there are different scenarios, and there are different values you can ascribe to these things. Like you said on the radio, if you go too far, they can flag you, and it's reasonable. But ideally, there should be as little censorship as possible. I mean, I'm a huge Scorsese fan, and his movies are so profane. Not only profane, but so many ethnic slurs. Mm-hmm. And Casino, De Niro's Jewish. Ace Rothstein is Jewish, and I love. And I'm not speaking just for myself. It's all my Jewish friends. Like, we love when Pesci goes off on him and you crazy Jew, this and that. We feel represented. It doesn't always have to be like Sunshine Hallmark representation. It can be like street representation. It's like awesome. Like, yeah, like he knows us. Like, Scorsese is Italian. He's from New York. He knows Jewish people. It's so tied up in the artist being able to find the right note. And on the other hand, with Tarantino, who uses the N-word a lot, I often feel like he's a poser. Like it hits the wrong note in my inner ear. I'm like, I think he just wants to be cool, and I think he's backed off that over time. So It is like, it's kind of a case-by-case call, but in general, my attitude is like, you really should be open just to hearing what people. You should be open to hearing what people have to say.
Yeah, I think that's true. And there's a point where, I think there's a point where it comes across real. Like when you're talking about Scorsese, he doesn't put words in just to shock people or to get people to watch. It's just like nude scenes in a movie. It's not just gratis, sex shot. It's just it has to be appropriate, otherwise it doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely appropriate. And also, I think another valuable dimension to this is what you were saying earlier in terms of sharing your vulnerable self. Like if you're bringing nudity in and it's just to titillate the audience, it's kind of like, it's a Hollywood movie, but it's a little north of softcore porn and the motives are just to titillate and sell tickets. That's very common and that's one thing. But if you're bringing nudity in and it's awkward and it's kind of sweet and it's kind of weird and there's kind of new ideas around it and just like new dialogue or whatever, and it's coming at an angle that's lived in, then that really is valuable, and people shouldn't get uncomfortable. So, but there definitely is a chill in the air. Yeah,
Ask Never makes me uncomfortable. I'm the Howard Stern fan, so I'm the nutball here. So I hear you. Yeah. I think he really pushed the envelope. Yeah. Well, yeah, but it gives the opportunity of just being yourself and be able to say, "Listen, this is what I do." And the idea is either you watch it or you don't. You listen, you don't. It's sort of, it's kind of that line.
Yeah, and in addition, you can take or leave it. Number one, number two, the solution. If somebody says something you don't like, and I've dealt with this a lot with the op-eds, like. That, I've had a couple people be like, all right, this man should never be able to speak again. It's like, no, that's not the solution. Like, that's not, the ideas aren't going to go away just because you've taken them out of your field of sight or you've silenced them temporarily. On the contrary, they're going to sort of fester in the darkness, which is what you don't want.
Well, and people forget that part of art is the right and the need to provoke and offend sometimes. That's part of the reason we do it.
No question. I mean, Jordan Peterson, he said that in order to be able to think, you have to be offensive, something along those lines. Like just offensive ideas are part of being able to grow your mind. I mean, you can't constantly be running into your own internal fences.
And if you say anything that's worth listening to, you're going to offend someone.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you said it. It's just all in the course. I think people that are acculturated. Like when I was growing up, me and my clique of guys I grew up with were very into being deep. That was our thing, like smoking weed, deep conversations. And if you live that way, if that's like sort of like your way of life, your code or whatever, then you're always going to be encountering thorny, uncomfortable, extreme, disturbing ideas. Mm-hmm. And I've sort of like, I don't think any of us, like I'm not in touch with all of them, but I think we always carried that forward. That was just the way we were. And there was just the type of guys we were. We're kind of weird in that regard. But it's kind of like a value system. So, and I think it's fun to have an exciting mind. I mean, that's open to strange things. Like, for example, I think the most current piece of pop art in this conversation is probably the Borat sequel that just came out.
Oh, yeah.
And there were things, and I thought it was hilarious. Like, I was saying that I couldn't breathe. I thought it was so funny. But there were definitely a couple scenes. I won't say which one because I don't want to ruin it for people that haven't seen it. But there were definitely a couple scenes I didn't think were funny at all. But that doesn't mean I, like, crossed my arms and became upset. Like, I was like, oh, he's shocking me right now, but I don't think this is funny. But again, there's no need for pearl clutching.
Well, I do that all the time.
Right. That's where I draw the line.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's over. Yeah. So, what's your plans then? Like, what do you plan on doing next? Like, where do you want to go with all this? Like, where do you see yourself?
Good question. The big thing is with these Amazon marketing tools, because I just took my backlist. Red Dennis is the outlier because it's with this good publisher, but I took my backlist. It was all spread around to different good publishers, like people in horror and sci-fi, but I took it back from them. Like, these books are getting a little older in some cases, and I republished them all under my own company, the same entity that puts out the newspaper. And I'm really trying to push these. So I just got a marketing consultant in San Diego, so I'm working with him and checking in with him every few days. And that's been the past few weeks. So I really would just like to get all of this going on the marketing end of things. And having the newspaper work and click so well as a business inspired me to get more serious on the marketing end of my books, which was never, again, like it was never something I had the luxury of being able to attend to because I was always, just like overloaded with ghostwriting. But now that's my focus.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, so now what is your website or contact? Where do you want people to go if they want to find out about you?
I think the best place is Facebook, and I'm always interacting with, we got I have my local community or city, we got the horror community, the sci-fi community, so it's a whole mishmash, and I'm always talking to other authors and readers and fans and all that kind of stuff.
So just your Facebook, okay. So we'll have we'll have that for people. So how do you find it? So when you took back some of your books from other publishers, was it hard?
Yeah, it actually was. One of the publishers was called Crossroad Press, terrific company. They actually are Clive Barker's home base. Like, they put out a lot of Barker's books, and really strong. And it was strictly a business decision. I was like, well, I'm not going to be able to use these Amazon ads unless I'm publishing myself. Like, then I can access the portal. So it's kind of like a logistical thing. And the books were sort of trickling along. There wasn't a lot of commercial activity. So with that case, I mean, they made it easy for me. It was contractually an option for me to pull them out, but they were like, oh, that was sooner than we expected. So that was one end of things. And I had another book that was with a publisher called Permuted Press, which was called The Devoted, which I actually had to spend $500 and buy the rights to back because they had paid in advance. It either never earned out or it broke even, but I had to sort of recompensate them for artwork, and it was worth it because I'm like, you know what, I want aside from Red Dennis, which is my first novel, which is kind of in a different run. I was like, I just want everything under my own umbrella. So it was a process, and then of course you're dealing with formatting, new cover art, ISBNs. Like it was a big haul.
Yeah, there's always a lot to it. So what do you do if you get stuck? Like, as in, you can't write. Have you ever had that?
Yeah, I have. It's interesting. More as I was talking about like MLK and feeling like an old man. Like, I've written so much because of the ghostwriting. So with that stuff, it was always I was on a deadline. There's a financial incentive. There's a legal contractual component where I have to deliver. So I always had to find a way. That's why the title of that book is S+C. Like, I had to find a way to sit down and do it virtually every day. And generally that's all tied up in just sitting down and starting to type. Like, basically try not to think and just like start. Usually the first couple paragraphs are torture, but then you sort of ease your way into it. It's kind of like self-hypnosis. So I think on a logistical end, anybody can do that. It's just the idea that you don't wait for the muse to come to you. You just sit down and start, and then the muse appears. And I think that's super valuable. But right now I've sort of written my mind out. Like, in 2019 was when I drafted Red Dennis and S+C because I was like on a liberation tour after all that ghostwriting. I was like, all right, now it's time for my own stuff. And I'm just like in no place, aside from writing news, which is a lot less demanding mentally, I'm in no place to do anything ambitious. I'm sort of packing it in for the COVID winter here and just like laying low. And when another idea bites me, I'll go for it. But I think up until early next year, I'm just gonna sort of stick with marketing and stay less productive.
COVID winter, right? COVID's a hoax, isn't it?
Yeah, it's over. Didn't you hear?
I'm glad you asked. I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah.
Didn't it turn
or
to
some people are telling me it's going to be over on Tuesday night when the return comes. So.
Yeah, except for those 90,000 people that were infected today. Yeah. So.
Right.
That's not real. Come on.
A small detail.
Yeah, it's math. I know.
Yeah. They're all actors. They're crisis actors.
Right.
Please.
Yeah.
You know, they got to, even crisis actors deserve love, right? I'll tell you. So what's your advice for someone that wants to get in this? If there's someone that's 17, 18 or whatever, and they kind of go, I want to be a writer, I want to be a filmmaker, or anything in this area, what would you tell them?
I would say the business models now, like in the past decade, increasingly on an accelerated level, are skewing toward, like, you need your own platform, whether it's film or writing. You know, with writing, could be self-publishing, could be a website where you're self-publishing. But just start generating content. Of course, you want it to be of a fine quality. You want it to be revised, poured over, done carefully. So that's all tied up in having a trustworthy network that can give you feedback and hold your feet to the fire in terms of giving you honest opinions as to the value of what you're doing. So definitely subject yourself, to the opinions of other people, even though there's a fine line. You don't want to overdo that and suppress yourself. But if you have people that you can trust, that you think are on your side and supportive, hone your work with the feedback of those people. It helps to be in community with other artists, because I think artists, when they travel in groups, sort of cross-pollinate and influence each other and keep each other motivated and productive. So there's that end of it. And then I would just say it's a matter of a continuous distribution of content through your own platform. I think that's what it's going to more and more look like as time goes on. It's the Joe Rogan experience. It's just like you don't even have to market it. Just keep putting more content, more content. That's how our newspaper grew. I mean, right now there's like 600-700 articles up there. It's like, just keep doing it, keep doing it. In the beginning, we got naysayers. We had people that didn't trust us. We don't know what we're doing. Just keep adding it. Just ignore them. Keep doing it. And then it grew, and then we had advertisers, and it's just like, but it's a daily discipline of showing up and just continuously sending the message. You're in business. Here's what the content you're doing, and you're going to be doing more, which is a lot. It's pretty intense compared to what I think all of us probably have. What we came up with, where you didn't always have to be productive at all times necessarily. You could have work that would maybe occupy more cultural space, and if you did something once in a while. But the environment we're in now, where there's so many voices and microphones on social media, like there's so many platforms, that's the way the game is played. So your own platform and just stay productive.
Do you think that's hurt the quality of work because there's so much out there and there's no?
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to say there's no sort of like the old traditional days of going to a publisher and you have to get approved and then it goes through all this. There was some sort of some sort of kind of editing and marketing and all that. Now it's left up to people that haven't done it before. Do you think that's kind of wrecked some of it?
Some of it for sure. I think the spread is now vaster, so there's more junk that's visible for sure. That's just like you got books coming out with typos and grammatical errors, and then some of these authors, some of these self-published guys. Like for me, it was taboo to self-publish. It took me years to finally pull the trigger. I waited for layer after layer of credibility to add up before I finally jumped in myself. Because it's not like there's still a stigma attached to it in the back of my mind because it was so looked down upon when I started. It was like called vanity publishing, and still you have these cats that just give it a bad name. I mean, bad cover art. It's just like so. I do think that piece of it, whether it's coming from your circle, your social circle, you're in a writer's workshop, there absolutely has to be a counter influence that's editing you or some sort of vetting, since it's not necessary anymore. But on the upside, like speaking of somebody like Joe Rogan, then the good thing is in all this mess of media that's out there, all this noise, there are like voices that are coming through that are more authentic and less corporatized and more spontaneous and surprising. So that's been kind of cool. So, and especially for the sort of thing I'm doing, like a lot of my fiction is transgressive. There's really not space for that anymore. Like I think Chuck Palahniuk is the one. And just like Clint Eastwood is the conservative filmmaker, I think Chuck Palahniuk is the transgressive author in the mainstream, and that's it. Like even Bret Easton Ellis with American Psycho has said like he wouldn't be able to get it published now, and you hear that over and over from people that have been around. So, like Oliver Stone is another hero of mine. Like he said, none of these movies would have gotten made now. So, I think the DIY thing is liberating in that regard. But yeah, there has to be some level of quality control, and it does bug me also that. On the audience side of things, the interaction has changed, and like often the audience will accept things that just aren't aesthetically well put together. So it's like, wow.
Yeah. That I've noticed that. I think the quality of listener or viewership or reading and stuff is kind of not as good. I don't know. It's kind of weird.
100% right. Yeah.
But I think it kind of relates, just like now all the commercial art, like pop stars do commercials with their brand new songs to sell products.
Yeah,
that used to be so taboo. You'd never get Led Zeppelin doing.
Oh my God! It's just like
Remember the outrage when they first used the? You remember the outrage when they first used the Beatles music for commercials?
Oh, forget it! Yeah,
things have sure changed.
Yeah, that was just wrong.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and now it's like the whole media environment has that tone. Like everybody's on Instagram, like everybody's like eager to sell out, and there's like ironically there's less of a cake to cut into at this point. But but it's good. I do think there is I always get bear and bull markets mixed up. The bear market is when you're hibernating, right? That's when the tide is low. Yes, I think, we're in, it pays to be able to survive in both. Like I've seen a lot of artists and creatives that are only bull market players like maybe they exploded in the 90s when the tide was high, but now it's like it's completely over for them because there's no ability to adjust whatsoever. So I think it pays to stay elastic, even if there's that feeling of like, wow, we're really losing a lot of the values around here. But yeah, but just keep doing your thing.
Yeah, I've never had values, and I explode all year. So
right. There shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. Well, there we go. So now I guess we're out of time, but our guest has been Eric Shapiro. We'll have his website or his Facebook and information up on ours, so people listening can do one click and find him. Thank you for being here, Eric.
To find out more about our show, guests, or to listen to past shows from our archive, please go to www.houseofmysteryradio.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.